As you're no doubt aware, I'm a big fan of strange and weird yokai. The weirder, the better. So when I started reading about this one, well, I knew that I had to share it because the more you think about this one, the funnier it gets. This week, we're going to take a look at Sanshiro, a judo yokai. Yes, you heard me right. But first, a little background. According to stories, Sanshiro appears when you're just out and walking around town. Suddenly, numerous hands will reach out from the sky, grabbing somebody who is walking by the arms and legs. As the person is stuck, unable to move and struggling to get free, the numerous hands will suddenly tighten, and with a yell of, "Hey!" the person will go flying unceremoniously through the air and onto the ground, as though they've just been tossed with a judo shoulder throw. Now, as someone who learnt judo in Japan and has been tossed around, if you're not prepared for the fall, it can be pretty darn painful. Imagine it. You're just walking down the street. Suddenly, numerous hands appear out of nowhere that grab all your limbs, and then next thing you know, the world is turned upside down as you are tossed through the air and you land painfully on the ground. What the heck? Well, if you experience such an event, it's said to be the work of Sanshiro. No matter how much of a fight you put up, no matter how much you struggle, it doesn't matter. Once Sanshiro has its hands on you, you're going to get tossed, and it's going to be painful. Funny, probably, but also painful. But why do people call this yokai Sanshiro? It uses the characters for 3, 4, and the suffix to denote which sun one is, i.e. the first, the second, etc. That alone doesn't tell us much, but it's theorized that the name actually comes from an anime that was popular in the late 1960s, called Kurenai Sanshiro, or as it's known in English, Judo Boy. The show is about a boy named Sanshiro, who's skilled in judo who is searching for his father's killer. Another key aspect of this yokai is that, like many others on this series, it only attacks children. As such, this judo-throwing yokai that only attacks children was possibly named after the famous young judoka in the popular anime series, who commonly threw his foes to the ground on the side of the road. It's not entirely rare for yokai to throw people around, but it is rather odd for them to be so skilled in martial arts. And how exactly are you supposed to deal with this yokai? Well, that's the great part. You can't. Well, if you're a child, that is. As I mentioned, this yokai only seems to like throwing kids around, leading many to believe the yokai itself is also a child and perhaps challenging itself. But the only way to deal with it is to simply grow up. Then it will leave you alone to toss around somebody of its own size, presumably. Nobody actually knows how old it is or even what it looks like. It's just said to appear as a bunch of hands coming out of nowhere before you find yourself firmly planted back on the hard earth below. Neat. Maybe take judo lessons if you're truly worried about it and learn how to safely land, because you are getting tossed, one way or another. And that is the story of Sanshiro, the judo-throwing yokai who sneaks up on unsuspecting folks in the street just to toss them around before disappearing again. What did you guys think of this one? Do you have any similar stories from your own countries? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you again next time. If you can think of it, Japan probably has a creature for it. Women in particular seem to come in all sorts of varieties, like the gap woman, the slit-mouthed woman, the 8-foot-tall woman, and so on. Well, this week we have yet another one for you, although she is rather niche. This lovely lady is known as the Bag Woman, and well, it'll soon be obvious why. This yokai is thought to have been a somewhat recent creation, and what makes her unique is, well, the bag on her head. Hence her name, Bag Woman. She's said to appear in parks late at night, and you can tell her by her appearance. She wears a rather plain skirt, and wears a shopping bag over her head. Or maybe the bag is her head. Nobody is quite sure. In fact, nobody is quite sure whether the Bag Woman even is a woman or not. It's assumed she is because she wears a skirt and has shaved legs, but it's also said that her body is rather muscular, so there's a chance this yokai might actually be the Bag Man. Either way, people have settled on calling her the Bag Woman, so that's what we'll go with too. Now, while she wears a shopping bag on her head, it's said that this isn't just any old shopping bag. The bag itself is also covered in strange geometric patterns that, from a distance, appear to be eyes, but once you get closer, it's clear that there's something else. Some have claimed these are actually secret Freemason symbols, but again, nobody is quite sure. All that we know is that there are some strange shapes on her shopping bag and, as of yet, nobody knows what they're supposed to mean. Could they be a code? Could it be that she just likes to look fashionable? Maybe time will tell. So now that we know what she looks like and where we can find her, what does the Bag Woman do? Well, not much really. People claim that she appears in parks around the country late at night and she's a hot topic amongst the school kids in those areas, but by all accounts, she's not actually a dangerous yokai. She just seems to show up and sit next to people. She doesn't talk, she doesn't attack, she just exists. Does this mean that the Bag Woman is actually a friendly yokai? Maybe she's just lonely and wants friends. Why else would she be showing up in parks and sitting on benches next to people? There have never been any reports of her harming people, so maybe she just wants a friendly chat. But then, there have never been reports of her talking either, so maybe she can't. Perhaps that's why she has the bag to begin with. Who knows? There are numerous theories as to the Bag Woman's origins, however. One of them is that she's actually based on celebrity Nakazawa Takeshi. Nakazawa is an author, character designer, and researcher into unknown creations. He's also known for wearing a cardboard box on his head with various pictures and such on it. Did someone create the Bag Woman in tribute to him? Maybe, but maybe not. Another theory suggests that she was inspired by the Great Leader in the Kamen Rider series. The Great Leader wears a bag over his head and beneath it there's a head made up of a bunch of snakes. Creepy. This character was popular during the Showa era, and if he was the inspiration for the Bag Woman, that would mean she's been lurking for quite some time now. Decades even. Finally, another potential inspiration, or at least a rival for her claim as the one and only Bag Woman, is the character Hagane from the movie Kawaii Onna, which came out in 2006. If you haven't seen this film, well, it's certainly something. But the second segment of the movie focuses on a woman named Hagane who, well, wears a burlap sack over the top half of her body. She also doesn't talk, only kind of growls and makes the occasional noise, and beneath the sack is, well, flesh. And teeth, I suppose. She's not the nicest woman around, but visually she's quite similar to our shopping bag woman who hangs around parks. And that is the mysterious Bag Woman. Where did she come from, and what does she want? Nobody knows, but unlike other creatures that have featured in this series, if you run into her, you don't really have to worry. She doesn't seem to pose any danger to anyone at all. She just rocks up to parks with a sweet decorated bag on her head and sits down on benches, perhaps hoping to kill a little loneliness. But what did you guys think of this one? Do you have any similar stories from your own countries? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you again next time. If there's one thing Japanese urban legends and folklore loves, it's turning old women into terrifying monsters. You could fill an entire encyclopedia with all the scary grannies alone at this rate. And this week, we're bringing you yet another of those creepy old ladies that make you think twice about heading out on the road late at night. This week, we're looking at the clicking granny. In Japanese, she's known as Kotsukotsu Baba, Kotsukotsu Oba-san, or even Kotsukotsu Obake. The Kotsukotsu of her name refers to a sound that we might refer to in English as a clicking, tapping, or knocking sound, which might already give you some ideas as to what she's known for. So, what exactly does the clicking granny get up to? Where can you find her? And why should we fear her? Well, if you took Turbo Granny and combined her with Teke Teke, you'd actually get rather close to what Clicking Granny is. That's right, she's another speedy old lady who loves zooming down roads. But unlike Turbo Granny, Clicking Granny doesn't have any limbs. The click, click, click sound you hear as she approaches is the sound of her bones hitting the pavement. Now, as is common with urban legends, there are several versions of Clicking Granny floating around, although we can generally file all these different versions into two main types. The first and perhaps the most common version told today is where Clicking Granny is basically the old lady version of Teke Teke. Like Teke Teke, it's said the clicking sound you hear as she approaches comes from her elbows on the ground, because she has no lower body. In this version, it's simply the sound of her elbows and not of actual bones on pavement. She is literally just Teke Teke, but old. As the story goes, you can find her at railway crossings because she was hit by a train one day and it cut her in half. For whatever reason, she was unable to move on and instead turned into an angry old woman. Understandably so. I'd be pretty upset if a train cut me in half as well. At any rate, she now lurks around railway crossings looking for a new pair of legs, and if she catches up to you, she might just take yours. I'm not sure why she needs some new legs though, as she is apparently quite speedy without them, reaching Turbo Granny speeds of over 100 kilometers per hour, even without legs. Those are some fast elbows. The other version of Clicking Granny, the one that is slightly more unique, sees her retain her limbs and lower half. Well, mostly anyway. This time around, she's missing below the elbows and knees, and the clicking sound comes from the bones that are poking out, hitting the ground as she moves. This particular version seems to be more popular in the Tokyo area, and may have originated there, although it remains unclear. Still, this version also borrows from other urban legends, and rather than being cut in half by a train, this time around, Clicking Granny was hit by a car, and that was what left her in such a bad state. Instead of lurking near railway crossings, this granny travels the roads and highways at high speed on her bony limbs, looking for the person who hit her. As such, if you're driving a car that's a similar colour and model to the one that hit her, then you may be unfortunate enough to hear her clicking as she speeds up behind you, looking for her revenge. Looking for the origins of Clicking Granny can be a little confusing because of how many versions of her seem to exist. Kotsu kotsu isn't exactly a unique sound, so it seems that over the years, various stories have combined under the one umbrella term, and even though they were entirely unrelated at one point, now they're all lumped together as the one scary old woman. The version you hear, though, probably depends on where you are at the time. In writing, there's evidence of an old woman going by the name Clicking Granny in the scary storybook Don't Turn Around to Tanaka in Your Dreams, that was published in 1996, and the Everyone's Scary School Stories Green book, published in 1995. In this version, a story originating in Mie Prefecture, it was said that only the ends of her arms were cut off in a train accident, somewhat combining the two main versions we know today. In this version, she's called the Clicking Obake, or monster. The same book also details another version where the Kotsu Kotsu Ba-san, or Clicking Old Lady, chases after a couple in their car down the highway at speeds of 120 kilometers per hour with just her cane. Here, it's the cane that makes the clicking sound, not her bones or elbows, making her more similar to Turbo Granny. And, yet again in the same book, it details a Tokyo version of the clicking granny that shows up late at night at a tunnel near a dam in Okutama on rainy nights. This particular granny isn't to be feared, however, and her name comes from clicking her elbows together. If you happen to see her doing this, you will be granted good luck. Nice. Going back a little further, the book Scary School Stories Special 2, published in 1994, has a version of Clicking Granny that appears on a road near a junior high school in Tokyo. It said that if you pass that road at 4:44 p.m, then you'll hear a clicking sound. If you turn around, then you'll spot an old woman with no lower torso running at you on her elbows. This one is basically the Teke Teke version, combined with our favourite time, 4:44. And if you look her up on the internet today, again, you can find all sorts of different versions. One sees her appearing near a public phone in the Nishitama district of Tokyo. If you happen to be using the phone there late at night, an old woman crawling on the ground might suddenly appear. This version is missing her limbs from the elbows and knees down, but she's still speedy as and won't hesitate to chase you down with the speed of a car. This particular phone is located in an area with lots of traffic accidents, so it's likely that Clicking Granny was involved in one of them and continues to remain on the spot where she died. At the end of the day, there are numerous versions of Clicking Granny, but they can all be summed up into basically the same story. An old woman who died in a traffic accident and now, in the afterlife, she haunts the living with a clicking sound that generally comes from her bones or elbows. Perhaps it was a car, or maybe a train. Maybe she just lost part of her limbs. Maybe it was her entire lower half. Either way, if you hear clicks coming towards you and they sound fast, chances are good Clicking Granny is on her way, and it won't end well. But what did you guys think of this one? Do you have any similar stories where you're from? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you again next time. She has a strange name, this one. The Jar Princess. What does that even mean? Is she a princess of jars? Well, not exactly, but she is a literal princess, and her unfortunate afterlife is related to jars. So let's take a look at this sad and understandably upset woman. In Japanese, she's known as Tsubo Hime-sama. A tsubo is something we might call a jar, a pot, or even a vase, like the picture you can see in the background here. They generally have a somewhat narrow neck and then a wider, bowed body. Imagine trying to fit yourself in one of these, and you can probably understand the situation this week's princess finds herself in. Perhaps the most common version told of the Jar Princess comes from none other than our favourite Kaidan restaurant. In volume 19, which came out on December 10th, 2001, you can find the tale of the Jar Princess. This was also later adopted into an episode of the anime that aired on November 24th, 2009. As the story goes, there was a castle in Wakayama Prefecture long ago where a young princess lived. However, the castle was attacked and the princess killed. Her body was then placed in a jar and buried. Kinda rough, huh? The reason why she was killed or why the castle was attacked was never made clear. She died before finding out. But rumours suggested that her father's retainers betrayed him, killing him and then, obviously, needing to get her out of the picture as well. Either way, the princess was killed, her body put in a jar, and then she was buried, never to be seen again. Except when somebody dies in such a horrible way, they usually are seen again. They're unable to move on, and so they continue to haunt this world. Many, many years later, an elementary school was built on the same ground that castle once stood. And, by pure coincidence, one of the toilet stalls happened to be built right above the jar the princess was buried in. It didn't take long for rumours to spread around the school of this strange toilet. Apparently, if you went in there, you'd be cursed by the jar princess. Hands would reach out of the toilet, and a voice would beg for help. "It's dark. It's scary. Let me out of here." Naturally, nobody wants to hear that coming from beneath them when they're doing their business, so the children did their best to avoid that terrifying toilet. In the anime version, the jar princess can be found in the toilets next to the school gym. You can supposedly hear her sad voice as soon as you enter the toilets, but most children don't actually believe the stories. After all, the toilets are brand new, and there's a massive window letting in a lot of light, so it's hardly the dark, dank place you'd expect from most toilet stories. Yet, one of the girls enters those same toilets alone one day, and then she hears a voice coming from the third stall from the end. "It's dark. Help me." Naturally, the girl gets the hell out of Dodge, but she remarks on how sad and pained the voice sounded. But how do they know that this scared, sad voice is coming from a princess in a jar buried beneath their school? Well, one of the local elders informs them of the story of the castle and how the princess was killed by one of her father's retainers, then buried in a jar. And that's how she got her name. Why nobody ever dug this jar up, or how they heard about it in the first place a few hundred years after the fact, is of course never brought up. But if you go there today, you can still hear her sad, pleading voice as she begs for help. Help, for some reason, she never receives. Pretty cruel if you ask me. While this is perhaps the most popular version of the Jar Princess, it's actually not the only one. This is simply the Wakayama version of events. There's another version that takes place back when flush toilets were far less common than they are today. Back when most schools still used the old botton toilets. These are the non-flush ones that got their name from the splash or plop you might hear when using them. In this version, the Jar Princess could be found in an old non-flush toilet on the outskirts of school, around the time that school buildings were being modernized and flush toilets installed. But these dark, dank old toilets on the outskirts of school were naturally a breeding ground for scary stories, and one of them was the Jar Princess, said to lurk at the bottom of these non-flush toilets. Tsubo can also mean a depression or a basin, so in this case, she might not literally be in a jar, but rather in the bottom of the toilet. In any case, she was said to lurk in the last stall of the girls' toilets, and there were scratch marks on the door from one of the children she had dragged in. Before she dragged you in, you would hear her voice, however, and if you wanted to avoid a grisly, plopping fate, then you had to do two things. First, you had to repeat her name over and over while doing your business. Tsubo Hime-sama. Tsubo Hime-sama. Second, you had to make sure the toilet was always clean. She might reside in a toilet, yes, but she still has standards. Keep that area clean, you filthy animals. Then she won't have to drag you in there with her. A similar story from Miyagi Prefecture finds the Jar Princess also lurking in an old non-flush toilet in an old wooden building. Here, she's said to lurk in the fourth stall from the entrance, and if you ever enter that toilet, she'll drag you in and you'll never be able to leave again. It's also said that if you call out her name 7 times, somewhat similar to calling Hanako-san's name 3 times. Then she will reply. You can also knock on the door at night and ask her to play. This particular version is more likely a variant of Hanako-san and has nothing to do with the Kaidan restaurant version of the Jar Princess, however, with their only similarities being the tsubo in their names, although each one using a different meaning of the same word. Like many of the apparitions we've looked at in this series, often entirely different creatures get lumped under the same name over time, even when they don't have a lot in common. Here, the many tsubo princesses share only the toilet in common, and that's hardly a unique setting for Japanese monsters, as we know. The most common version known today sees the princess in a literal jar buried beneath the toilets, while others just lurk in the old-fashioned non-flush ones. They do all seem to want to drag you in though, so as always, if you find yourself in an old Japanese toilet, beware. It might not be the Jar Princess, but chances are good that something is going to try to drag you in there, or at least that's what all these urban legends would have us believe. But what did you guys think of this one? Did your school have any creepy toilet stories? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you again next time.